Hey, welcome. Here we are trying to get my camera got a little undone here, and I apologize for that. What we're going to do today is we're going to talk about different methods for teaching art. We're specifically going to be looking at Art for the Fun of It by Peggy Davison Jenkins. I feel this is a great book, chapter 4, and it is Methods for Teaching Art. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. So here we go. It's going to be methods used in teaching art. So now, in her book, she lists about, I think it's 6 or 7 total methods. And the first one we're going to discuss is something called creative expression. Now, creative expression is a type of art making, and it is a method used where basically the child gets to choose the materials and the supplies. And when they choose those materials and supplies, then they make an art project accordingly. So, for example, I have here out on my desk, I have some markers, and those markers then could lead to me making a project just because I have the markers. So creative expression is really the freedom for the student to just make art in any fashion or method that they choose to make it. It is a very traditional method. It allows for the child to have ownership and feel that they are in control, and they make projects based off of their mood, their feeling, their experiences, things of that nature. The hard part about teaching that in a school is we usually use it as the students come in, and you can tell they're not necessarily focused. So one of the things that I do, because it's good for students to have this mental, what we call a brain break almost, because everything's so structured in school. When they come in my art room after having traveled from another classroom to my room, they are sometimes a little ecstatic. And so the creative expression comes in the form of what we call free draw day or free art day. So they can use any materials. I'll put out materials and they can make art. A lot of times kids will end up playing with some clay. I've got modeling clay that we use that doesn't dry, and they can always rewarm it up. I've also got paints in paint containers, gouache sets that they can use. I also have tempera paints in pans that they can use. They like to cut with scissors, glue, and tape are big fans. So creative expression, markers are huge. Colored pencils are huge. Anything that can put immediacy into what they're thinking. So creative expression is probably one of the biggest things. And Peggy really recommends it. And other people are recommending it too, because it is a form of play. And that form of play, when we create those things with play, we have a tendency to, I thought I had one hanging up and I don't right now. But right here, for example, on my wall. Do a good job. This is all created during this item that's on my back wall here, was all created by a student during free draw day. So another project that you could do, another method for teaching is called assigned topics. Now, assigned topics are a simple project in the fact that you just give a word clue. So for example, we could say earth. And you could get something that looks like this. These are some, they could be God's hands holding the earth. It could be something related to protecting the earth. I think the thing she uses in the book is snow. And you just use the topic of snow and you get tons of, students will create different things based off of just that topic generator. I like to use Dr. Seuss quotes. So sometimes I'll read, specifically, I read from one red fox, blue fox, or one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish, is the red fox doing the quote of 3 free fleas flew through 3 cheese trees. A breezy breeze blew through 3 cheese trees. This made those 3 free fleas sneeze. And then have them come up with a drawing that represents that. Now, other than sometimes you might have to show how to draw a truffula tree, or you might have to show how to draw a flea. Most kids, their imagination goes wild and they start to think, ooh, how could I do this? So assigned topics are really good because they get a child thinking about something and they get them moving in a direction. So between creative expression and assigned topics, Peggy Davison Jenkins says that those are the best methods for teaching young kids. So first grade, second grade, third grade, how to make art. Now, they are also good for fourth, fifth, sixth. They're good for seventh and eighth. They're good for ninth and 10th. The deal is that you will always feel with both of those assignments that you as a teacher might have a little bit of no control. And that's something that you have, that's your responsibility, is to allow students to go where they want to go with the materials. You can give guidelines and say, hey, we're not going to use this today because for whatever reason, but you'll be surprised at what students will create and how they'll create it. So, again, keep in mind that those are really good. Now, another method that's used by art teachers is what we call copy. Now, copy is something that comes about. The word copy usually means cheating. But in art, we are taught, as you get further away from just elementary education and you get more into teaching at a collegiate level or a higher high school level, you do copy a lot. Copy is a part of the fourth stage of development that a student should make. This is the fourth stage of development where students start to say, well, I can't draw. Because whatever they tried to copy doesn't look like what they've tried to copy. The hard part about copy is there are set rules for copying. One is you have to learn to use a grid. Another is learning how to understand the idea of proportion. Proportion is a principle of design that we're not talking about in this class necessarily, but it is something that I have to start teaching in fourth, fifth, and sixth grade. I have to start teaching that idea because if I want students to progress further than the first three stages, which are scribble, and then there is what we call schema and post-schema. Those three types are development stages of a child, and assigned topics and creative expression easily fall into those parameters, but you have to be careful how you enter into the world of copy. Now, who is our biggest friend of copy and why do we use him? Well, the Drawing in 3D book by Mark Kistler, this follows a technique that's called the Lee-Imes method of drawing. And the Lee-Imes method of drawing is to show basic shapes and then build from those basic shapes and allowing students to then progress to a finished product. Now, where the undeveloped students will get lost is in the final stage where he makes a big leap and adds lots of things that we don't have. But that's why in my coursework, we're doing things such as learning how to use 4 values. 4 values then help to create a stronger image. So copy is an essential tool, but it has to have you have to allow it not to go to complete. So at a certain point when we're using copy, I will start adding other things in and making suggestions to students as I walk around the room. Copy is something that can be done first, second, and third grade. But again, it's one of those ones that as soon as theirs doesn't look like the original, the student starts to feel that they can't. So you have to be really careful of that. And how you give information on that one is really important. But I like to use assigned topics and I like to use copy together. And then I incorporate creative expression with it. And then if it doesn't look like it, I just keep reminding them where they could make adjustments and how they could, oh, look at your eye. You could just make that a little bigger and that might now look like the 2 eyes that were drawn on the board. All right. Now, another one is directed method. Now, directed methods we see it a lot in elementary school by elementary teachers who really didn't pay attention in Art 270. Now, what it means is that you say, okay, cut your paper like this, and you cut, no, we're going to cut it this way. No, we're going to cut it this way. Directed methods and copy can be very similar. So the way that Mr. Kistler does it is a little bit directed methods, but it's a little bit copy. So the hard part is that in certain things in art, we have to do directed method, but the final outcome does not always have to look exactly like, and you have to emphasize that. I spend a lot of time talking about with kids that it is okay to make mistakes. We learn by making mistakes. When we first learned to walk, we fell down a lot, but nobody stopped us. We kept walking. So those are things that we need to think about when we're working with our kids. Peggy is not a big fan of those with the elementary kids, but I find that if you're trying to do coursework to develop kids into better drawers by the time they're in senior high and a better understanding of art, directed methods has to be used. But it's better in a class size of 10 than it is in a class size of 30. But it's easier to incorporate in a class of 30 because you can get all 30 doing something, but you really can't look at their artwork and see where they're going. So that becomes the real challenge of directed methods and copy. Now, there's another one. This is called pattern. And patterns, I kind of alluded to that. That's where, okay, we're going to cut a triangle out. We're going to cover this shape out, and then we're going to assemble this together. Now, patterns is also related to what Mr. Kistler does, but again, Mr. Kistler chooses things that don't look real. So that makes a big difference. Whereas in patterns, the teacher's going to make one that looks beautiful. And I always go back to the pumpkin. There's an orange pumpkin with triangle eyes and a jagged, like lightning bolt mouth. And then it has green folded legs and green folded arms that come out and they go, "Rrr." That's a perfect example. Or another example would be drawing a turkey by using your hand, and you draw around your hand and then you just turn the fingers into feathers and this into the head. Those are very much pattern. And it can be detrimental to the child in the sense that if theirs doesn't look like what it was supposed to look like. So the big thing is if you're going to use patterns, you have to allow students to have freedom to go different directions. Now, the last one that she discusses in her book, and this is the go-to item for everybody, it's a coloring book. Anytime you hand out something that has lines and you tell the students, stay within the lines. The lines are our friends. You then create an issue where the artist feels that he has to do exactly what's been prescribed. Now, and I've actually witnessed a grandmother tell a student that they were coloring wrong when they put a different color on a different spot, and the grandmother actually grabbed the child's hand and pulled the hand away and said, "You can't do it that way. That's not the way it really looks." Where to the child was using creative expression and coming up with their own colors. Then the grandparent stepped in and kind of crushed that child. So you got to be really careful of that. And that was in my family. I witnessed that in a situation, in a family setting. And it was frustrating. I had to sit down and talk to the grandmother and say, it's okay if they do that according to the rules. It's just you that wants that specific color there. But a person could have a different color there. And it was a long discussion. It was a hard discussion, but it's one of those things. And then if you think about your own art experiences and how methods are used in teaching, Peggy really likes the assigned topics and creative expression. And I will use those as much as I can. So creative expression and assigned topics. But I do spend time with copy, and I do spend time with directed methods. And I have found that you can use patterns. And I have found that you can do the prepared outlines. But the thing of it is that you don't want to use them all the time as your go-to item. You have to have a mix. And to teach basic art skills, sometimes you have to use methods that aren't just about, hey, let's make some art today. And it's just going to be, we're going to feel how it goes type of art. But bear that in mind, and how you do that, and how you be careful of not teaching something because you don't want your room dirty. Be careful of not teaching something because, you don't want the hassle. Be careful of not teaching something because it goes against you in the sense that you like things structured and organized. Be careful, because students need to have play and creativity. So with that in mind, remember, this was our mini lecture on methods used in teaching art.